And Washington has played down expectations of any breakthrough from the first trip by US Secretary of State to China in 5 years. Antony Blinken is due in Beijing on Sunday and had a tense call with China's foreign minister just yesterday. Kang urged the United States to stop meddling in its affairs and harming its security. Now, the relations between the world's two largest economies have tanked in recent years. Now, there are various issues of contention between Washington and Beijing. But before we tell you about the flashpoints between the two countries, let's first tell you about the tense phone call which took place between the Chinese foreign minister and his US counterpart. Now, ahead of Blinken's visit to China, Daniel Crittenberg, the Secretary of State of East Asia, clearly said that we are not going to Beijing with the intent of having some sort of breakthrough or transformation in the way we deal with one another. Meanwhile, let's also now tell you what the Chinese side had to say on this. The Chinese foreign minister urged the United States of America to stop meddling in China's affairs and harming Beijing's security. Now, not only this, just yesterday, a Beijing readout warned that the relations between both China and the United States of America had faced new difficulties and challenges since the beginning of this year. Let's now tell you about the sticking points between the United States of America and China, starting with the Ukraine-Russia war. Now, US has accused China of providing weapons to Russia. Meanwhile, China has not condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine till now. Moving on, the G7 summit, which took place a few weeks ago, the leaders at the G7 summit took a firm stand against China's economic coercion. Meanwhile, China and Russia called the G7 summit an incubator for anti-Russian and anti-Chinese hysteria. Now, let's move on to another issue of contention between the two countries. We are talking about the issue of Taiwan. Now, in recent months, China has stepped up military and diplomatic pressure on Taiwan. Now, US has said that it will defend Taiwan if China attacks. Moving on, US has also complained of aggressive maneuver by Chinese fighter jets. Now, let's move on to another topic of spying and foreign influence between US and China. Now, US has accused China of using secret police stations worldwide. Meanwhile, China says that they are not secret police stations, rather they are volunteer-run centers. And US in February shot down what it suspected was a Chinese spy balloon. Now, however, China says that it wasn't a Chinese spy balloon, it was a civilian airship. Now, in May, China convicted an American and a Hong Kong resident of espionage. Lastly, let's also talk about the tech and the chip war. Now, US has targeted Chinese companies across the technology sector. Washington has accused TikTok of sharing user data illegally. And Micron has also become the first US technology firm targeted by China. For more on this, we have with us Dr. Malcolm Davis, who's a senior analyst in defense strategy and capability at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Thank you so much for joining us on WION, Dr. Malcolm.
It's my pleasure.
Right. Now, Dr. Malcolm, Blinken is the first cabinet official to travel to China under the Biden administration. Will the trip help the United States of America reset its relations with China as both the countries continue to fight over various issues in recent past?
There's not going to be any reset. There's not going to be any breakthroughs that will lead to some sort of rapprochement or détente breaking out between Washington and Beijing. Essentially, this trip will be the first probably of several, maybe, that will occur in coming months and years to keep the dialogue going and to address issues of mutual concern. But it's very clear that the Chinese are not interested in any sort of guardrails. They're not interested in any sort of rapprochement or détente. That was made crystal clear at the Shangri-La dialogue in Singapore recently when the Chinese delegation refused to meet with Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. And then the Chinese defense minister gave a very abrasive speech where he essentially said to the Americans, if you want peace, then essentially cede the Indo-Pacific to us by keeping out of the South China Sea. So I don't see peace breaking out anytime soon.
Right, Dr. Malcolm, like just today, Washington also downplayed chances of a breakthrough with China. Now, if the aim is not to redefine the relations between both the countries, then what will dominate the talks when Blinken visits China in the coming Sunday?
Well, I think you obviously need to see these as a process of diplomacy that all diplomats undertake on an ongoing basis. That not every summit has to lead to a breakthrough. And I think that Winston Churchill famously said, "Jaw is better than war." So this is jaw. This is talking. This is diplomacy. This is about engaging China to try and address American concerns about Chinese behavior, particularly in relation to issues such as Taiwan and also in the South China Sea, to address concerns about China's rapid build-up of military capabilities, including a rapid expansion of its nuclear weapons capabilities. So this will not lead to some sort of breakthrough, but they will certainly be talking about various different security issues, flashpoints, and you raised some of those in your lead up to our discussion now.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Malcolm, for joining us on WION and sharing your insights with us. Thanks very much.
Thank you.